Good evening from Tucson, Arizona. My name again is Simmons Bunton. I'm here in the ancestral traditional lands of the O'odham and the Yaqui. And thank you for joining us tonight for Terrain.org's reading with Elizabeth Jacobson and Karen Babine and Ian Ramsey. Thanks for spending your Memorial Day evening with us once again. And it's great to see everybody. I can see where some folks are coming up from. It's so wonderful that you are part of this Terrain.org community. It's really exciting. After the reading, we'll be sure to leave time for Q&A. If your connection becomes slow or freezes, as mine did, you can maybe join on your phone. Otherwise, turn off your video. That might help. But in all cases, we ask that you remain muted so that the readers can read undisturbed. And we encourage you to post your questions and other positive feedback in chat. So we're recording this reading, and we'll make that available from the Terrain.org website and our YouTube channel shortly. A couple quick announcements for you. First, the 16th annual contest in poetry, fiction, and nonfiction for Terrain.org is now open and has a deadline of September 1st this year, which is Labor Day. It's a grand prize of $1,000 in publication for each winner, plus $200 for each finalist and publication. The cost to enter is $20. And the judges this year are Bloss Falconer for poetry, and Douglas Carlson for nonfiction, and Samantha Dunn for fiction. So good luck for that. Our normal submission period otherwise does not open now until January 1st. Second, a general reminder that Terrain.org is staffed all by volunteers and operates based solely on donations and small grants, and not many of those. If you'd like to support our efforts, I encourage you to donate at terrain.org/donate. Okay, now let's turn to tonight's reading, followed by Q&A. I would normally be posting Terrain.org and book links in the chat in support of our readers this evening, but I have to see if I can get in on my computer to do that. Otherwise, I think Karen, Elizabeth, and Ian may help out with that. In all cases, you can find some of their amazing work on Terrain.org, and you can find their books, mostly, I think, in bookshop.org or with a press. And as I introduce them, I think we say who the press is. So now on to the reading. Thanks again for joining us. We'll read in this order. Ian will read first, followed by Karen, and then Elizabeth. Okay. So now it's my pleasure to introduce Ian Ramsey. Ian is the author of Hackable Animal by Wayfarer Books, finalist for the Prism Climate Prize. His writing has been nominated for a Pushcart Prize and featured in Terrain.org, Orion, High Desert Journal, and many other publications, as well as in collections like The Gift of Animals, Writing for Peace, and Maine Voices. Based in Maine, Ian is the founding director of the Kauffman Program for Environmental Writing and Wilderness Exploration at North Yarmouth Academy. Did I say that correctly, Ian? Where he's taught environmental writing, expeditioning, neuroscience, creative entrepreneurship, and music for 26 years. A licensed Maine guide, Ian holds the highest sea kayak leadership award in the world. Oh, that's cool. And has led trips and backcountry expeditions on 4 continents with a special focus on Alaska. He holds an MFA from the Rainier Writing Workshop, has been an artist in residence at Mount St. Helens Science Center and other locations, and frequently collaborates with climate scientists on field research. Ian is a founding board member of Physiology First, a global nonprofit that teaches students, families, and educators how to manage anxiety, perform, and learn better. Thanks, Ian, for joining us. Take it away.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Simmons. It's an honor to be here. It's always such a dream to work with Terrain and the incredible generosity of Simmons and Derek and so many others. So I'm going to be reading to you from my book, Hackable Animal. A lot of this book is me. I travel a lot, different parts of the world, and a lot of it is me sort of trying to wrestle with the sort of metaphysical consequences of globalization, technology, climate, immigration, 21st century disruption. So I'm going to start with a poem called Abashiri, which is a little town on the Sea of Okhotsk up at the top of Japan. Abashiri. I aspire to end up glacier frozen, or in a grizzly's gut, following in the lapsed family tradition. Going back 10,000 years, I mean. I'm thinking about this while eating wasabi peas beneath a woolly mammoth in a museum in northern Japan. The burly pachyderm found in a 10-mile plank of ice is now a resin of chemicals, instead of a giant lung of fresh chewed ferns. I'm thinking about becoming a glacier entrepreneur, cutting glaciers out of Greenland and rigging them in South Beach for ice age mojitos, glaciers in Sao Paulo for air conditioning, glaciers for the next big Dubai figure skating complex where Korean teenagers can land triple axels on a LEED certified organic surface. Since we can't hurl spears or love each other beneath wads of furs, we'll glacier out Singapore to host the Winter Olympics, recycling melt off into bottled water, and using profits to support a cooperative of vegan climate change activists making artisanal kombucha from ferns found in mammoth stomachs. Glacier off tops of mountains and glacier them back on. Glacier oceans back to cooler temps. Glacier my Pleistocene instincts to my paleo diet and write an app that tracks the eskering in real time. Popping another pea, I look up, part orphan, part ambition, considering the noiseless, shaggy requiem. It doesn't look back. All right, I'm gonna go to so this is a poem called Smokey, as in Smokey the Bear. Smokey. The bear coughs the bristletone smoke like the rest of us, but isn't allowed into the visitor center for AC and free Kool-Aid. No one said it was easy being an icon, a t-shirt, an ad campaign. And what can I learn from the bear? He wears a GPS ear tag and I an iPhone as I sit alone for 2 weeks in smoky Yosemite, an abandoned husband with a burning heart. Half Dome is more Beijing smog than Ansel Adams' gelatin print wilderness. Across the Sierras, the smoky signs feel useless. Endless helicopters drop dispersant. The bear and I see extinction out of the corners of our eyes. The annual fires roaring across the West are extinction, and administration selling off public lands is extinction. The last grizzly in the Sierras was once extinction. The cougar crossing the highway a protest of extinction. The story ends with the real Smokey sleeping out his days in Washington, D.C.'s National Zoo, dreaming of sagebrush while retirees eat wieners and point. A boy grows up, his head dreaming on a teddy bear. Without realizing it, his life is a shrine to bears. Bears in Alaska, bears in Hokkaido, bears in the Andes, bears in Quebec. Bears that don't promise self-actualization or a good 401k or freedom from cancer. Bears that knock around the soul without permission. Bears that ruin a marriage. The boy becomes a man who wants to love women, but they will never smell like bears. People are people, but bears are a secret howling ladder to a world of smoky caves. Even as I try not to think about bears, Smokey ambles slowly away, his fur wet with my dreams. I have no right to bring him back to life. So now I'm going to take you to someplace completely different. I'm going to take you to downtown San Francisco to a sushi restaurant. And It's interesting. I wrote a lot of these poems. I started a lot of these poems during the first Trump administration. And so a lot of the things I was writing about seem to be echoing ever stronger. This is called Arinyani, and Arinyani is a Hindu forest deity, just so you know. Our purple-haired waitress has a forearm tattoo of Arinyani, the Hindu forest deity. And we're talking migration corridors, desert tortoises, and rewilding over Onokoroshi and Tuna Tataki, while next to us, a group of programmers are talking AI, betting on how long before the bots take over. I'm 8 years old again in central Maine's forests, contemplating yet another moose while coveting the $29.99 Radio Shack robot in the Sunday Flyer. The code ninjas are hoodies and opportunity, while the tree huggers are Marin Cool and well-stocked wine cellars. We joke over reintroduced grizzlies roughing up Shasta crystal shops, and they dude chortle about a VC YouTube video that went viral. And here's another joke that really happened in 1893. Muir, Tesla, and Rudyard Kipling walk into a bar. A dinner party, actually. Nikola Tesla explaining how he'll hydroelectrify Niagara Falls. John Muir sniffs disdainfully at this incursion into the wild, and Kipling makes a joke about how the future has Muir over a barrel going down the falls. And here we are, a century later, still kegging down Niagara's gush. Maybe the AIs will move us into a post-carbon utopia, or maybe they'll pass over humans in favor of a functioning Gulf Stream and swallow migrations. Or maybe carbon levels hockey stick and the barrel crashes in a symphony of refugees and starvation. As the techies update their Instagrams and the conservationists drive their Teslas back across the bay to Sausalito, I wonder, has Arignani lived through these dimensions before? Or is this some new velocity, and what are we hurtling towards? So this next poem was written a few years ago, but it has become ever more pertinent to the moment. And it's called Greenland. I've decided to buy Greenland. It's lonely, cold, and melting, a problem to be solved. Just look at a map and you'll see an island the size of Saudi Arabia with a population the size of Dubuque, Iowa. Its ice caps are melting and making weather unstable for the rest of us. Passed by in the global economy, it has a GDP lower than Lesotho's. It is simply silence in the great white north. A hunk of unused rock where a handful of Danish semi-citizens huddle under the endless Arctic nights like anchorites, eating salted fish and watching Scandinavian crime dramas. So, I can buy with an easy mind, but who even does that? Maybe I can hire an exponential life coach or start a hashtag Buy Greenland social media movement or partner with a Chinese startup to take it over for ski resort rights. Except that a few Tibetans and Taiwanese have warned me how those kind of deals tend to turn out. Nevertheless, Greenland deserves a better future. We'll 3D print carbon negative cities with vertical gardens that grow 500-pound cabbages in the 24-hour summer, so much closer to utopia than the perennially dysfunctional Costa Rican eco-villages. We all must wake up each morning, so why not do it creatively? Should I hire Inuits to guide eco-tourists on Aurora Borealis dog sled tours? Wouldn't the robot mining operations be elegant and free of human rights problems? Could we corner the market as the last place to see a wild polar bear? Isn't this the logical precedent to life on Mars? No. We come from the Earth, and we must keep our feet planted within the relentless gravity of our lives. Perhaps I'll Kickstarter this enterprise, offer up tax havens and vacation home plots to survivalists and billionaires. Would AIs be interested in the first nation with robot citizenship? The massive island shrugs off more ice and settles into its tectonic plates. A frontier under a frontier. It's a narwhal in a goldfish world. The 10,000-pound Mercator-distorted gorilla on top of the spinning planet. Its glaciers penetrate the imagination. Canada and Russia are too busy fighting over Arctic shipping lanes to bother. How to proceed? On Monday morning, I'll reach out to Queen Margrethe II of Denmark. I'll talk of the spirit of her Viking ancestors and offer her rare earth mineral rights, the first refusal rights to the Netflix series about Knud Rasmussen, a sea-setting compound. In its own dowdy, cold northern way, the island mumbles, "Develop me, develop me." So the next poem is about Concha Buica, who is she is a Spanish sort of flamenco Latin jazz singer. And the way I always describe her is if Nina Simone and Tupac Shakur had a baby that grew up in Majorca singing with gypsies, that would be Buica. And I think
Okay.
she's a really interesting example of
Come on,
sort of
babies.
the beauty of globalization. Her family is from Equatorial Guinea, so she has this big, dusky African voice, and she crosses all these boundaries. So this is a poem about seeing her perform in Boston. So there's a lot of like Boston references, but it's really about globalization, and it also represents Harvard and the Kennedy School. So it also feels like right now it's appropriate of the moment. Chanteuse for Conchabuica Canteora. Blocks from Fenway, between old brickish streets, college bars, and startups, Conchabuica sings. On Comm Ave, a Boston Bruins bro fuck you's a yellow cab racing to beat the Tip O'Neill Tunnel's 9 p.m. closing. But on stage, Buika starves the clocks. Her voice, a salty dusk rustling in moon-dry creek bottoms. Her Roma rasps spattering the crowd like paint, or surf, or tears, an urgent orphaned longing. All around this bridged up city, built on fill, the ocean crouches, waiting. And on stage, Concha sings 100 storms, born in Africa, Iberia sharpened, charging across the rising Atlantic, tearing up the old cartographies. Conakry, a red puddle, Madrid, a dusty yellow wash. Hurricanes race, their cords relentlessly spinning the sea's feral, heating and catalyzing an impulsive chemistry. Across town, Kennedy School Fellows debate the causes of Syrians in Italy, Bangladeshis flooding Dhaka, just as Buika's Bulgarias equal India via Iberia divided by suffering. An algorithm scaling up across the Aegean and the Rio Grande as parched south floods north, as we coil and stomp to Buika's Afro-Cuban duende, trying to forget the bombed marathoners still haunting the street outside. And Buika, shadow-wasted with claves and fandango, howls the new diaspora, singing Vivir sin miedo. Her weeping and uprooted tides unlocking the distances. Dogs or kin? The brunt of the question draws tight as the hour lags, dizzy with strange weather. I'll bet on the dark horse, the complex parable read in the ancestors' chicken bones. Forget the maps. We're following the seas, wherever they go. And I will finish with one more poem. This is called Geoengineering. Cool. Geoengineering. And once again, thank you so much to terrain.org, to Simmons for this amazing platform. And it's an honor to read with Karen and Elizabeth. Really, really privileged. Geoengineering. When hope seems to be dwindling, I can always graft some water onto ice to build a frozen stupa that will mimic a glacier to provide meltwater for a village in the dry months. I can lug tubing up the mountain into a north-facing valley to harness the donations of the sky into an ice cone that I will bow to, less for dharma and more for survival. Or I can help roll concrete balls into the ocean to rebuild reefs, or use drones programmed to replant forests with specific biodiversity. Maybe this will mean fewer space sunshades and injecting aerosols into the atmosphere, but probably not. When the earth turns itself inside out, you can never go home again, even if you never left. This occurred to me in a Berkeley conference room as 3 tenured faculty with no skin in the game prattled on about solastalgia, that sense of psychic or existential distress over ecological change. They proposed giving up the white privilege of John Muir's spiritual solitude and instead measuring our relationship to the earth in terms of climate refugees and carbon taxes, which felt like writing lovemaking poems in terms of spermatozoal emission. So how to chase beauty in the newsfeed of tragedy? Make mandalas of microplastics circling in the North Pacific? Genomically de-extinct a passenger pigeon to resuscitate ecosystems? Dizzy with isms, I start back up the mountain, careful to step lightly on the melting glacier. A future inside a crevasse, inside an opportunity, inside a loss. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian, for those frankly amazing poems. I feel like they're so important, so essential. And for folks who don't yet have Hackable Animal, it's such a terrific book. There are 4 poems on train.org that we published not too long ago, right, Ian? Maybe in March, I think, not long after the book came out, that we're super excited about and that folks should read. But of course, everybody here should buy, I don't know, 5, 6 copies of the book and then give it great reviews everywhere because that's what we do, or should be doing, perhaps. Maybe not 5 or 6 copies, 3 or 4. Okay, anyway, thank you. So now let's turn to nonfiction. And Karen Babine, I'm going to say her last name properly this time. Sorry about that, Karen.
Okay.
Karen Babine is the 2-time Minnesota Book Award winning author of All of the Wild Hungers, A Season of Cooking and Cancer from Milkweed Editions in 2019, and Water and What We Know, Following the Roots of a Northern Life from the University of Minnesota in 2015. Her 3rd book, The Allure of Elsewhere, a memoir of going solo, is out now, just now really, from Milkweed Editions. She also edits Essay, a journal of nonfiction studies, and is the editor of the essay anthology Beyond Truth and Fact, Innovations in the Craft of Creative Nonfiction, forthcoming in 2027 from Texas Review Press. Ooh, that should be a good one. She teaches creative writing and literature at the University of Tennessee, Chattanooga, where she is the UC Foundation Associate Professor of English. Karen, take it away.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for organizing this and asking me to be a part of it. So, I'm going to read from, okay, that's not going to, this is The Allure of Elsewhere. It is new as of last Tuesday, and it is about packing up my very tiny, funky 13-foot scamp camper and heading to Nova Scotia by myself with my cats to explore my dad's family, who was among the first French Acadians to Nova Scotia in the 1620s. So if you know the Cajun history in Louisiana, they were the Acadians who were deported by the British in 1755. So my family was both deported and not deported, and that is part of some really interesting history. So I currently have another cat on my lap because this one likes to be the center of attention. So we'll see if she allows that. So I'm going to read a little bit from the beginning and a little bit from the end. And I just put in the chat the piece that Simmons published a few years ago called Romer's Gap. That is a chapter in here. And so if you want more, there it is. So, chapter 1. I'm in the back seat of a black diesel Blazer with my 2 younger sisters. Dad is driving, Mom is navigating. It's July 1987, and we're driving through the Mojave Desert to San Diego to visit Dad's family, the California Babines, and it's our first major travel together as a family, and we're learning the peculiarities and practicalities of what this kind of movement means. I'm 8, Christy is 6, Kim is 4. We don't have air conditioning because Dad just had the engine rebuilt, and since it was still getting broken in, he's worried about the Blazer overheating. And in the middle of the Mojave Desert, and temperatures past 100 degrees and probably closer to 110, so we try to make do with the windows rolled down. From an 8-year-old view, there is nothing to see. The world empty and spreading out beyond sight to a place where you're not sure if it's mirage or real. It is intensely miserable. The kind of misery that melts animosity between small girls who would prefer not to be sitting so close to each other, little legs imprinted with the rough cloth of the back seat, sticky skin scorched by metal seat belts that still somehow emotionally mark the 1980s on my skin. Bickering over which of the 2 of the 3 of us would get to use the 2 red tape players who had to sit in the middle seat, and she's touching me. No, I'm not. Yes, you are. We like telling stories of how my sisters and I made up our own games on trips like these. There was a standard license plate game, which was always a little more fun when we hit national parks or stayed on Air Force bases, where we usually found Alaska and Hawaii. Once we got all 50 states, our reward was ice cream. I suspect we would have gotten ice cream anyway. Over the years, my sisters and I invented the quote game, which mostly consisted of somebody picking a movie like The Princess Bride, and the first one not to be able to come up with a quote lost. Have fun storming the castle. Anybody want a peanut? As you wish. The first ones were easy, but once you got the easy ones out of the way, the quotes got more obscure and the game got harder. I was from a land of lakes and trees, so deserts were a curiosity. Petrified forest in four corners, where we could stand in four states at once, and Mesa Verde, where we dipped into the coolness of kivas and thrilled at what it would have been like to live in that place and time. But on days like this, when little girls are too hot even to argue, the vast open landscape is not interesting. It is simply space to move through en route to somewhere else. When we finally drive into Needles, California, our suffering is rewarded with Dairy Queen, where I still remember how the 40-degree change in temperature from outside to inside made me slightly nauseous. Even now, I can feel that knowledge in my body, my belly, that memory, that place. They were an exotic dream, this family of California Babines, the way people become in your imagination. We rarely got to see them because we knew where they lived, because California was special. We saw it on television and in movies all the time. They lived just north of San Francisco, land of cable cars, sourdough, and Alcatraz. They drove the Golden Gate Bridge, ate See's candy and Ghirardelli chocolate. I grew up in small-town Minnesota, where our biggest claim to fame in Nevis was as the home of the world's largest tiger muskie, and when people came to visit us, we took them 20 miles away to see the headwaters of the Mississippi River. We ate lefse and venison and wild rice. Everything that was important in the world was elsewhere, not here. California, or the East Coast, was where a person went when they grew up, gained reason. The California Babines we were going to see were a family to pin stories and hopes of stories on because they were the aunts and uncles and cousins I always wanted, but didn't have in Minnesota because my mom was an only child. There was a part of me that desperately wanted to belong to a large, boisterous family who had large, boisterous gatherings, energetic events of deep generational memory making, and my dad had 3 brothers and a sister, and they each had families full of cousins who were nearly the same age as my sisters and me. I always wanted best friend cousins, the way I saw in my books. I was the oldest, and while Christy, Kim, and I played together well, generally got along, and had great imaginations that led to epic adventures, sisters were not cousins. The life of the California Babines was the kind we read in books, stories we saw on television when we watched Full House on TGIF every Friday. The allure of elsewhere. It was a concept I knew before I had words for it. When we went to stores, we could find giant framed photographs of New York or Paris or San Francisco, never the Minneapolis skyline or the Stone Arch Bridge. The stories I read were never set in Minnesota, and I wouldn't learn until college that the first American wit to win the Nobel Prize in Literature was a Minnesotan. High culture happened in New York, or Los Angeles, or Seattle, or New Orleans, not St. Paul. Elsewhere. When Starbucks started its You Are Here mug series, I was irrationally excited to see the Twin Cities represented, but unless you went specifically to a local gift shop, you weren't going to find I Heart Minneapolis or Grey Duck t-shirts. The place I grew up in was the butt of jokes, full of unsophisticated people and bland food, with a football team whose blowing of a field goal in 1999 in the NFC Championship still causes Minnesotans acute pain. We haven't won a World Series since 1991, though the Twins did win the World Series in 1987 on my birthday. We had to laugh at ourselves. Everybody else did. Once I applied for a job on the East Coast, and they asked me in the interview if I'd ever lived in a city before, and I was living in Minneapolis. California, and the West in general, was important. Everything I read told me so, even as I died of dysentery nearly every time I played the Oregon Trail. All right, I'm going to read just a little bit from the end. On my last night in Nova Scotia, before I took the ferry to New Brunswick, went down into Maine, and then headed back west. And apologies to the French speakers. I can't speak French, and so I'm going to butcher some of this. Say it in French, Acadie. I repeat the unfamiliar pronunciation, Acadie, putting the emphasis in different places than the English Acadia I'd been using. I learned to say it right over a tasting of l'Acadie Blanc, sunshine gold, crisp in contrast to the roundness of French vowels at the Domaine du Grand Pré winery. Later, I listened to Beausoleil's In Search of Acadia, and Acadie is the only French word I recognize, as Michael Doucet pulls something true and raw from his fiddle, the minor key clear and keening. Later that afternoon, I stand on the dikes the Acadians built in the 17th century, and I learn that Beausoleil takes its name from Joseph Broussard de Beausoleil, the name not far from Babine, on the memorial to families deported in Grand Pré. Beausoleil, beautiful sun in a minor key. When I left for Nova Scotia, I knew some of these places, these locations of family sorrow, but I didn't know them with my feet, and I didn't know how far I needed to travel to find out where it all started, if such a point was to be found. Standing here alone on the Bay of Fundy turns into a moment where I can watch timelines of history slide against each other, muddled in what is ancestral family history, contemporary family history, and the future history, legacy that I will create for myself on my own. The beautiful sun in a minor key, elusive behind a storm system that has drenched Nova Scotia for the past 3 days, has finally returned, and it brings with it the kind of glorious joy that can come only after suffering days of bad weather while camping. My campsite is only 100 yards from the Bay of Fundy, and those magnificent tides, that red water that never changes color no matter the influence of the sky. In moments when I sat inside my camper at my tiny dinette table with my pot of tea, watching the rain out the front window, I wonder about the land moving here under my feet in Acadie that I cannot feel, about the geological harmonic resonance created by the tides in this place that I cannot hear. There are more places on the planet that hold more gravity, and I did not expect the Bay of Fundy to become one of them. And this will become part of the stories I will tell about this trip, about this place, and how that story would only belong to me. This place, this moment, isn't a part of collective identity. It's mine and only mine. I'm starting to understand that there's something about Acadie, this water, these forests, primeval, that I'm never going to be able to escape, and that doesn't seem problematic. It's been 4 generations since Babines have stood in this place, and it feels important that the place doesn't let me go easily, that there's a restoration in this kind of storytelling, even if it doesn't look like what I intended. It's been 4 generations since Babines have stood in this place, 4 generations since a day, maybe like this one, 300 years ago. Go find your father, my 7 greats-grandmother, Anne Marie Landry, tells her eldest, her son, Pierre Babine. She's in her 50s, the mother of 5, sturdy, dark-haired, and strong-willed. Pierre, my 6th great-grandfather, is 25, unmarried, and I imagine him tall and dark and lithe, with a face I'd be able to recognize as my blood, and a quicksilver kind of efficiency about him. He has bigger ambitions than marriage, much to the distress of his mother. I have pictures of my father, my grandfather, and great-grandfather at about the same age, and I wonder if Pierre and Joseph share their faces. Pierre does what he's told, and he finds his father standing in just this place where I will stand, on the dikes his own great-grandparents built against the sea so they could farm the land. Joseph is quiet, as he often is, pragmatic in the way of understanding the world that is specific to farmers. Rain's coming in, Joseph says, and Pierre nods, wondering what his father sees in the sky and smells in the air that he does not. We could use a good soaking rain. The water is thick and red, but the waves still break pure white, then pull back out. Push and pull, push and pull. They stand in silence for a while, watching the fishing boats come in as the tide turns, their friends and neighbors. Where his father smells rain, Pierre smells trouble. Pierre wonders if his mother feels the same. Out of his 5 children, Joseph worries about Pierre the most, the one who will work the land but does not feel it in his bones. He's the one who's more comfortable on the water, changeable but predictable, a force that moves the landscape with the tides. And yet, Pierre will be one of the 2 Babines left behind, imprisoned as his parents, siblings, and extended relatives are tossed on a British ship and deported to Maryland. Neither of them know that this is one of the last times they will stand together and watch the water that will soon tear the family apart. But maybe Anne-Marie knows. On my last night in Grand Pré, when the rain has cleared to a setting sun so pure that it creates sundogs, rare in June, I walk the tidal flats looking for rocks. My kindred spirit of a niece has recently taken to collecting rocks, much to the consternation of my sister, who wonders where they will put them all. And I already have saved for her Thunder Bay amethyst and a perfectly shaped egg of white quartz from Yarmouth. Now, on the tidal flats in Grand Pré, in hours I am not yet willing to leave, I collect petrified wood from what litters the beach, relics of the forest's primeval, the grain of wood so clear I can see growth rings in the stone, time held in my palm in a way that I can count, measure in tangible form, a history I can physically understand. But the history in the stone in my hand is a dead thing, and it is vaguely wrong. Two young men in their mid-20s come down the steps to the beach, and I stay long enough to watch them catch the echo of twilight in their kites. "This is the best $25 I've ever spent," I hear one of them say, and I think I can hear the melody of a bow in the wind being drawn across the strings in their hands. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen, for that beautiful and fascinating reading. I can't wait to read the entire book. And as Karen mentioned, there is an excerpt, an essay that appears in the book as a chapter now that appears in train.org from a few years ago. So search that. Okay, so now our final reader is Elizabeth Jacobson, whose third collection of poems, There Are As Many Songs in the World as Branches of Coral, is just out from Free Verse Editions, Parlor Press, and was just reviewed on terrain.org as well. Her previous book, Not Into the Blossoms and Not Into the Air, won the New Measure Poetry Prize, selected by Marianne Boruch, and that's also Free Verse Editions, Parlor Press in 2019. And it also won the 2019 New Mexico Arizona Book Award for both New Mexico Poetry and Best New Mexico Book. Now, that's pretty cool. Her other books include Her Knees Pulled In from 2012, two chapbooks from Dancing Girl Press, and Everything Feels Recent When You're Far Away, Poetry and Art from Santa Fe Youth During the Pandemic from 2021, which she co-edited. Elizabeth was the 5th Poet Laureate of Santa Fe, New Mexico, and an Academy of American Poets Laureate Fellow. Her community work has received 10 consecutive grants from the Witter Bynner Foundation for Poetry. She is a reviews editor for terrain.org, and she directs the poetry programs at Santa Fe's Center for Contemporary Arts. Elizabeth, please read to us.
Thank you, Simmons. Thank you, everyone, for being here. And it was great to hear your work, Karen and Ian. Thank you so much. I'm a little congested because I came down with some terrible allergies. I posted a review that Heather Swan wrote for my book, and it was published in Terrain a couple days ago. I put it in the chat if anyone's interested in. This is the book I'm going to read. You can't really see my name, but or the title, but it's called There Are As Many Songs in the World as Branches of Coral. There's 3 sections in the book, and I'm going to read a little bit from each section. And the first section is titled Rhapsodies. This poem is Canyon Road. Driving on black ice, I brake too hard, spin into a 360, and then 2 more. Like the boom of a sailboat, the back of the car slams a dog. In the midnight darkness, I get out to find a coyote, his abdomen torn open. The canine holds my gaze as I cradle his head, one palm above his brow, the other on his snout, and hug him to my thigh until the chasm of his breath closes. An aloneness, not loneliness, comes from the animal. Yellow flecks inside his eyes flash for an instant before they turn to ice. I carefully tuck the coyote's cooling body under pine brush, rest my fingers on his forehead, cover him with snow. Nothing is made less by dying. Walking the next morning in the early fog, I watch a Cooper's hawk fly up and up above the road to scan the world for prey, then spiral down effortlessly, as if it were a single feather, hollow shaft traveling toward white frost. This next poem is called Not One, Not Two, and it's inspired by the Vimalakirti Sutra, which is an ancient Mahayana Buddhist text. Not one, not two. The foothills thrive with wild daisies and the warm, soapy smell of Apache plume. A red ant with a missing back leg pushes a tip of dry grass 3 times its size along the dirt trail, arriving at a small branch where it cannot push the parcel further. I lift the branch and the ant resumes its task. I pass an enormous anthill teeming with movement. Someone has placed a plastic straw in an opening, and the ants tunnel out, landing in a heap on top of each other. In the windy canyon below, a pair of white-throated swifts mate mid-air. Their eggs will hatch in a nest of twigs and moss glued to a rocky cliff with their saliva, which the ants will climb to lick. On the patio yesterday, I watched a burly carpenter ant get trapped in a web a spider was actively weaving, then work its way out to attack the spider. The insects wrestled on the concrete until the ant had the final swipe and marched off, leaving the spider stunned. An hour later, on my return through the foothills, there is the same red ant with the same piece of dried grass heading toward one of the openings in the big mound. Several from its colony hurry to meet it, and from this ant, 2 workers take the grass tip, carry it in front of their heads into the nest, while others investigate with their antenna the space of the ant's missing leg. I'm going to read from the second section now, and it's called Lullaby, and it's 4 titled sections. I'm going to read part of the first section. This poem takes place in suburban New York in 1965. A very sick baby is born into a family. There are already 2 children who are 4 and 5. And at the start of the poem. So it's called A Brown Stone, and the first section is called Igloo. I knew she was dying without knowing what dying was. My head peeking around the door frame, holding onto the sleeve of my 4-year-old brother. White translucent face, white cotton terry one-piece with feet. The baby's droopy body in the arms of the soft-spoken, rosy-cheeked nurse. Beehive hair pressed with an iron, white pants and shirt, white ruffled collar pressed with an iron. Always milk dripping from the corner of her curved, faintly smiling mouth, as if it were melted snow, still holding its white color. Always the same crooked smile, always the same corner with the milk, always the head not lifting, hanging off to the side like a sock doll. There was a continuous whir from the family surrounding our house. A lawnmower motor, basketball thuds, kids squealing under a sprinkler or handheld hose, wet-cut green grass smell of warm autumn. Each family with its own car noises, revvings and screechings. A new sister who couldn't swallow. Neighbors calling to each other out of open windows to ones already in cars. Cars packed with kids, kids sitting on the laps of other kids, front and back, 8 kids in the white Opel, going 1 mile to school, one mother driving, still in her nightgown, car coat not buttoned, maybe a breast would be flapping, showing a kind of white. I never heard anyone say, "We don't know what will happen." No one ever asked, "How is the baby?" All the mothers were young, but they looked old to us. Pointed fingernails polished red in the spring, red in the winter, tight pants and flowered shifts and cigarettes with lipstick marks, hair that curled up in the ends in one big continuous upside-down wave. I stole my brother's coins, tricked him by trading the bigger nickel for the smaller dime. He was happy to end up with more. Everything else was so thin, like the constant stream of formula milk from the baby's mouth. Her small, pretty face never changed expression, never cried. A snow baby with black pebble eyes, held up by the rosy-faced nurse who slept in her room. We sat on the edge of the twin bed, and she would put her in our arms, first my brother and then me. We didn't know the word trust, didn't know there was anything else. The nurse held the back of the baby's head up, tried to get the milk to stay in. Her long fingers were velvety, slightly blue underneath. I would touch them while I stroked the baby's silk hair. That winter, there was so much snow, we built an igloo in the front yard, just like the igloo in the polar bear book, with a square entrance we could crawl into. So much fresh snow came down, we could hardly see each other's faces if we were outside the igloo. Sheets and sheets of it hung in the chill. Inside the igloo, we made a wooden matchstick fire, sucked the melted water out of our mittens, sculpted furniture to sit on, ice benches and an ice bed with an ice nightstand. We brought in small branches from the pine outside and pressed them to the wall for decoration. We went into the big house for supplies, white bread, yellow cheese, purple jelly, mugs and plates, the Candyland game. More and more snow came down like heavy cream. Neighborhood cars in their driveways like igloos, piles of snow on the street like igloos. There was ghostly white daylight, and then there wasn't. Streetlights came on. We jabbed a hole in the roof for the smoke to escape. Two shadows, a beam, the silence and the hum. Two waxing moons side by side, sucking the melted water out of our mittens. They never called us in, even after it was dark. So I'm going to read two poems from the third section, and that section's titled Devotionals. This is the title poem for the book. There are as many songs in the world as branches of coral. I walk a long way, sinking in soft sand. My feet, two creatures of burden. Low-lying clouds mirror stormy ocean waves and wild eddies. The rack line, littered with elkhorn, with coral sponges, each one a finger from a different hand. Disappeared are the reefs they arose from. As a child, I combed black rocks of a jetty, prying starfish from pools, sucked salt off their legs, curious podia searching my tongue. I craved also the taste of ash, ate cigarette butts from the beach, put anything in my mouth to know it. I was 9, saw the photographs, bodies overflowing from wheelbarrows, corpses pitched in heaps like firewood at the sides of barracks. Didn't recognize what they were. Then I noticed the bird, a raven, eating the inside of a human nose. There are as many songs in the world as branches of coral. The sponges, the sea pens, the whips have a bloody, earthy smell. I lay the few I've collected on a wicker table to dry under the Adonidia palms and squeeze out the remaining brine. Soon they begin to sigh. These hours when the sky is white, my heart reels like a key in a squall, and I arrive again at the scowl of the red brick gate. There were no clouds that day above the camp. The grassy fields, bright green, tall birches in full leaf. I walked weightlessly on the train tracks, one foot in front of the other, balancing on rails. I pulled a rusty hairpin from the soil, put it in my mouth. 75-year-old tarnish, a perfumed female essence. The remaining brick chimneys crumbling, splintered garrisons, burial pits moaned. Here was an endless landscape of hatred this primeval. It was as if I saw each soul who had arrived and departed, shimmering impossibly in the emerald fields, and everything broke open and sang. There were no clouds that day I visited Birkenau, but the sky, it was white. The meadows, they glistened. The tall birches beckoned. Before I left, I ate a few blades of grass, peeled off a strip of bark, pressed 2 sharp stones, into my well-made shoe. And I'm gonna finish with something a little more upbeat. This poem is about memory and remembering and a long marriage. I've been married for 35 years, so it feels pretty long to me. Probably some of you have been married longer. This is called Very Long Marriage at Bedtime. And thank you again, everyone. Thank you, Simmons and Karen and Ian and all of you for being here. And I love Terrain. I've been the reviews editor for, I think, a little over 6 years now. So it's really fun. Very Long Marriage at Bedtime. I had somehow not remembered that any number times 0 is 0. David said, think of it this way, 20 zeros are nothing. We were in bed, teeth cleaned, night guards ready on the bedside tables, his 3 pillows stacked behind his head, my 5 arranged like a boat to cradle my back. An almost orange moon penetrating our window through smoky darkness like a blaze about to leap across an expanse of pine forest. How did this happen? All these years together compressed into this moment of repeating moments, so many of them indistinguishable, so few of them recallable. What does dividing any number by 0 do to that number? This is sort of fascinating, he says, that you don't remember any of this. He rolls toward me, glides his hand around my hips. His breath is minty, the skin on his face flushed. You're cute, he says. What else don't you remember? I remember running into you at the Albuquerque airport, honey, I say, after not seeing you for so many years. You wore black jeans and a black t-shirt, a black belt with a silver buckle, black Dr. Martens. I looked at you, your jet black hair, and somehow I saw that we were about to combine sorrows and joys into the terrifying equation of 2 people equaling 1 home. I remember being panicked, my heart leaping into an abyss, then sinking to my stomach as I watched what was to become the rest of my life glide his luggage off the carousel. I remember every minute of each labor, each delivery for both children, and how going into the birthing room for the second time, I remembered pay attention as the baby exits, that final wet sliding out of me. I remembered to pause for one of the swiftest moments in my life, a whole new warm body joining the living. Thank you so much.
Beautiful, Elizabeth. Thank you so much. And I can't see other folks here, but if we could give everybody a round of applause for reading, Ian and Karen and Elizabeth. Thank you so much for such a wonderful reading of poetry and nonfiction, which we so much need in the world. But hey, we're not done because we have a chance for some Q&A. And while I can't seem to see chat, maybe some of the readers can see if there are any questions in there. If not, I have a couple I would like to ask. But do we have some questions in chat maybe? No, no questions yet. Okay. Well, folks, get your questions ready while I ask this one of the 3 of you. So you all talk about or write about your place. And I'm wondering if you can share one surprising thing from your place or a place that you visited that continues to inspire your writing, but maybe something that isn't obvious, something surprising. So think about that. And I will start with Ian.
Yeah, I will I will talk about so where I live here in Maine, on the coast of Maine. I find so, Casco Bay, which is the bay nearest me, kind of. I live on the New Meadows River, just upstream of it. Casco Bay has the most high sea level rise of any ocean water in North America. So we're really in this kind of thing where we're seeing that plus ocean acidification. Like probably in about 20 years, we won't have lobster in Maine in any kind of real way anymore, which is like kind of an existential question for a Mainer, like Maine without lobster. But I guess what I'll say is I'm really inspired by seeing how these coastal communities are kind of buckling down and making adjustments to kind of do what they need to do to come together. I'm really excited. We have organizations like the Island Institute of Maine and different places that are really kind of in a thoughtful, nuanced way, kind of really looking at what do we need to do to have a sustainable future. And I think part of that is that, you know, we can draw on the wisdom of the Penobscot people and the Passamaquoddy people, indigenous people who've been here for a long time, but also, you know, European people have been here for, you know, greater part of 500 years. So there are long-standing traditions of living relatively sustainably and in wise ways. So I'm definitely feeling like surprised and inspired by that.
Awesome. Thank you, Ian. And I want to get to community later too, but let's continue this question with Karen. One surprising thing about your place or a place that inspires your writing.
I think I'm going to answer this in terms of this book, and what I learned like on this trip, because I really did become a little bit obsessed with the Bay of Fundy and Nova Scotia. And in addition to learning that the Bay of Fundy is the largest tides in the world, and there are like different kinds of tides, I learned. Like you've got vertical tides, you've got horizontal tides. Like I'm from Minnesota, we don't do tides. So, I mean, that's always going to be interesting to me, and learning that those tides are so strong that that they move the peninsula of Nova Scotia twice a day, and it's kind of it's one of those questions that sort of seems to kind of permeate throughout my work is how do we know who we are based on where we are? And you live differently in a place where you know, like the peninsula moves. Or, you know, I grew up in the Canadian Shield, which is some of the, you know, the oldest bedrock on the planet. And you live differently when you know that a place has earthquakes or has tornadoes. And I think that there's something really special about digging into what we know about who we are because of where we are. And it was interesting to kind of transpose a new place onto what I thought I knew about the world.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you. Elizabeth, one surprising thing about your place, and I know you have many, that inspires your writing.
I live most of the time in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and I've been here since 1988. And for the last 15 years, I've spent several months in the winter in South Florida. And I have to say, I see strange things happening in both places that hurt and impact the wildlife in a negative way. In Santa Fe, which is probably surprising to many people, the city makes decisions on a regular basis to take water away from nature areas and closing off the habitat for wildlife. And it's really devastating, and it's really I think it makes me, I mean, you know, to say sad, that's sort of trivial. It destroys me. The same thing happens in South Florida, although it's different. They make like a half-ass effort, like building some sand blobs in the middle of the intercoastal for mangroves to grow and try to get some birds to nest. Meanwhile, while other places they're killing all the shorebirds by taking more habitat away to build more condos and living facilities, developments. So I'm sorry to be so negative, but these things do inspire my work, and I just you know, it's really hard to see all this happening in both places.
Yeah, well, thank you, Elizabeth. I mean, it is Memorial Day, and there are some things to mourn that we must continue to mourn. Yes, and maybe more so, sadly. I didn't see, actually, I was able to figure out how to get over to chat here on my phone. I didn't see any additional questions yet. If anybody has some, please feel free to post them. Otherwise, I do have another question for you. And it actually goes back to something that Ian said in his response to this last question, but something that you all participate in, which is community, and whether that's in your writing or your literary work or your other work. And so I'm curious how engaging with others shapes or reshapes your writing process. And do you ever find creative inspiration sort of where you don't expect it, building from your communities, whether they're communities you're part of or communities that you create? So maybe we start with Karen on this one.
I think my easiest answer to this is that I feel like my work as a writer and my work as a teacher and my work as an editor of essay, they all feed each other. And, I get to teach books that I wouldn't get to teach otherwise because, I'm teaching X kind of class, or, somebody sends in a really great submission about something or other that I hadn't seen that way before. And one of the things that I really like about the way that essay works is like we're not interested in, territorial issues about who owns nonfiction. And so we get, literature scholarship as, easily as anything else. One of my favorite pieces that we've ever published, and it was years ago now, was a piece on falconry memoirs. And it still is, it's brilliant. And in the way that we're thinking of, nobody's done that kind of work on falconry memoirs before or since. I had a student, an honors student, do her honors thesis project on an environmental reading of Didion, and was looking at kudzu and eucalyptus and invasiveness, like never thought about it that way before. And whether it's students or it's, other modes of community, like I love those moments where I get to, like, I've never thought about it that way before. And that always leads to better writing.
Okay, thank you. Elizabeth, how about you?
Simmons, would you mind to say the question again?
Sure. Yeah. So community is central to your practices, and I mean that not just in writing, but also in editing and community and sort of the literary world. So how does engaging with others shape or reshape your writing process? That's sort of part one. And do you ever find creative inspiration where you least expect it in that communal work?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. And I think I'll just answer it in two parts. The first one, living in Santa Fe for 38 years, I've created a community, a sort of a teaching atmosphere for myself and for others. So I've always tried to support other writers and organize workshops and bring poetry to different areas of the community. For many years, I directed a writing program where we taught in local battered family and homeless shelters, and there were several poets who went into different shelters during each week, and we did that for 7 years, and it closed during the pandemic. I also started a project called Poetry Pollinators, where we have a giant native bee house made from the trunk of a felled cottonwood tree. And it's called Poetry Pollinators. And we have a panel for education that explains about the nesting bees and how we can help them. And then a panel for a poem by a local poet. And then we've held readings and environmental talks and educational like bee walk and talks by a scientist at the site. In fact, Pam, who's watching, is coming this weekend to teach a class for Poetry Pollinators. So yeah, so that's really great. And I always am so inspired by the people I work with and the energy of other people in the community to support poetry and the people who participate and write poems. I love hearing what everyone's written, and I always learn so much from that. And then the second part of that is, as a writer, I spend a lot of time alone. I spend most of my time alone, probably most of us who write do. And I always appreciate having other eyes on my work. And so over the years, I have relationships with different poets and writers, and those develop into, people really knowing my work and being able to help edit and refine. And I love doing that for other people as well. So I guess that's what I think.
Okay, thank you. Ian, in your community work, how does engaging with others shape or reshape your writing process?
Yeah, this is a great question. I find that I am not always, but I'm often kind of a writer of collisions. I'm someone who writes across domains, and I live in a lot of different worlds. And what I'm interested in is, what can I learn from this domain or this community that thinks differently or processes differently or comes at things differently, and how can I apply that to here? So that might be, this morning I was kayaking with the main invasive plant scientist guy, like, who works for the state, and he's in charge of all invasive plants. So we were talking about that. And last night I was with a friend of mine who is a chemist and really serious rock climber. And so all these people speak in different languages. And I'm really interested in how those languages speak to each other. And especially in this moment when we are increasingly often so siloed, whether it's politically or by algorithms or whatever, I'm really interested in finding those connections and those commonalities. And to me, that's some of the really rich terrain. And the other day, I was, not to make a pun, but the other day I was talking to a friend of mine who is a former Army Ranger who's now doing a master's degree at the California Institute of Integral Studies. And he's on this like spiritual journey that would have been unthinkable even a year ago, And so I really enjoy learning from others and then using that as a way to reshape how I think, and also to like communicate between those communities. So I think for me, that would probably be the best answer.
Okay, awesome. So community matters, you might say.
Just a little bit,
For all of us.
as this reading demonstrates, right?
Yeah, for sure. Okay, I think I saw a question here in the chat from Jill. Jill, do you want to ask that question?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Hey, Karen,
Hey, Jill.
nice to see you. It's been years. Yeah, I really enjoyed the excerpts you read, and especially the second one toward the end of your new book. And as you were reading, I loved your sort of insights into the your ancestors as they made their really divisive and harrowing journey across the Atlantic into a new, possibly not desired life at the time. But and I wondered how you navigated the facts you were able to ascertain and bring that to the page in a way that makes it seem more human and not like a really dry history book.
Well, the easy answer is that, I tell my students, like, history is only boring if you forget it's about real people. And so I'm the family historian, and I have been the family historian since I was about 17. And so this book is really layering like ancestral history, like the 17th century history with contemporary history, because the question that really started this book is like, why does my family not tell stories? Because I grew up with my mom's family. They would tell stories all the time. Like, you couldn't stop grandma from telling stories. My dad's family was another matter entirely. It was very much children should be seen and not heard. And it just felt it was hard to be at my grandparents' house a lot of the times. And so one day, like the naive teenager I walked into my dad's office and wanted to know why his grandmother and his uncle died on the same day. And I did not expect the answer to be murder. And so as I started to do some digging, I realized that my grandfather lost his entire family to violence. He lost his dad to suicide in 1943, just after he and his twin brother left for boot camp. And then in 1976, right before my parents got married, my dad's cousin killed his father and their grandmother. He had a schizophrenic break. And so there were really good reasons why they weren't telling stories, because it hurt. And so that started to think about this idea of silence and how we tell stories. But like I can trace this family all the way back. Like I can trace this all the way back to Antoine and Marie, who were the first. They are 9 generations back, and there's one branch. If you like it, there's one tiny little jump. If you like that jump, I can trace it like back through the Dukes of Savoy, back into European royalty, which might be my favorite trivia piece. Like the Babines once owned the Shroud of Turin, which I mean, I just love that. But the idea of like you can accumulate dates and you can accumulate places and you can trace where people go and how, but it's like putting feet back on the ground was really important to, yeah, this happened to real people. And the view hasn't changed since the last time the Babines were there. And like, what did they see and what did I see? Because Joseph and the two of them, and then three of the children were they were deported. Pierre and his brother Joseph were not, because they were in prison. And so that's how my direct line stayed. But then you learn like the little tiny things, like eventually. So Anne Marie died in Maryland, and then Joseph and the three kids ended up in Louisiana. And I've got the census records from, I think, 1787, and all four of them are in the Spanish forms of their names, which caught me off guard a little bit. And then I realized the Louisiana Purchase hadn't happened yet. It's still Spanish Louisiana. And so realizing that history wasn't happening in these kind of discrete pockets, like it was happening all at once. And, the Declaration of Independence was still 20 years away. And so part of its imagination, like who would these people that I am, descended from, what they have been like. And there's a little bit in there about, yeah, I'm always going to imagine them as like strong and smart. And, when statistically, some of them were probably very terrible people. And, you don't imagine them with backaches and allergies. You're going to, imagine the best of them. But it's an interesting thing to try to put faces back to dry data, which, is part of the things that I love about history.
Thanks, Karen. I think that's really a relevant question to all of our readers tonight, because whether it's an imagined sort of past or place like Greenland, or the childhood, or an actual past, and during the Hitler era that Elizabeth talked about. So I'd love to hear from we'll start with Ian, and I don't know, I don't see Elizabeth. Are you still here with us, Elizabeth? Ian, why don't we start with you?
Really? You don't see me?
Oh, there you are. Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
I'm on my phone. It does weird things.
Can you repeat the question, Simmons?
So the question is basically sort of, what is the weaving of fact and research and imagination when telling stories of the past, or maybe of a different place even?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where that's kind of the secret sauce. That's the magic, where when you can go into a world and let yourself imagine all the dimensions of it and to be surprised by it. So, right, you can look at the facts of it, but then you can say, where can I go that are 2 or 3 or 4 steps beyond that? And where could that take me? And what could that be a doorway into? I mean, so often you start writing about one thing and it takes you actually into a completely different thing. I always find that's like that it's excavating, right? It's the same thing with her family, right? You're just going deeper and you're going deeper, and then that's where all of a sudden you say, oh, this is what I came here for. I think that yeah, like my poem about Greenland is a perfect example where, I started just, oh, this Donald Trump wants to buy Greenland, whatever, and then it started, like, became this sort of like personal treatise on the heartbreak of capitalism and climate change and technology. And I didn't know that I would end up there. So I always try to just continue, like, okay, how can I go a level deeper? How can I go a level deeper? It doesn't always work, but when it does, that's where the really rich material is.
So it's mining in a way, in a positive way. Elizabeth, how about you?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. And The Brown Stone that I read from, that's a poem about my childhood. And so I was 5 and I could remember some stuff. And I spent about 15 years working on that poem. It's a long poem. Like I said, it's a second section in my new book. And I started with what I could remember and what I could feel into the memory. And then I just kept like going into it and like imagining and remembering sort of became a similar thing. And it was a really amazing process. And I take a lot of time with my work. Poems take me years sometimes. And that poem, the title poem, also was from an experience that I had that was incredibly it was a huge awakening. And it took me a long time to get that right. So I think just by staying with it and letting the imagination move through the story, but also curbing it back in to keep the facts that you like there. I think that narration is really important for me. I like it as a reader and I like it as a writer. I think it pulls a reader through and it pulls me through also the poem. So I always have a little bit of a story, no matter how lyric the poem is. So I hope that answers the question. Thank you.
It does. Thank you. And I think, that line of pulling us through is a good way to end this evening. You have all pulled us through what I hope has been, a decent day for you all. Certainly an amazing way to end it for me. So let's all give a big round of thanks to Ian and Karen and Elizabeth for such wonderful, informative, essential readings this evening. Thank you all for joining us, for your good work as writers and readers and activists, because we all must be right, and members of the community. So I hope you all have a really wonderful evening, and thanks for putting up with me here on my phone. And I'll see if I can get this
Thank
technology
you.
solved.
Thank you, Simmons. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you
Thanks
so much,
all.
everyone.
Fantastic. Thank you.